Deep in the heart of the Iranian plateau, among the towering stone columns of Persepolis, the wind whispers tales of an empire that once ruled half the known world. For 2,500 years, Persia was a symbol of absolute power, and in October 1971, that power was put on display in a way the world had never seen and will likely never see again. Imagine a city of gold-clothed tents rising from the barren desert. Imagine 50,000 songbirds imported from France, released to sing in the heat of the Iranian sun. Imagine a banquet where the guests ate off Limoges porcelain and drank from Baccarat crystal. This was the party of the century, a celebration of the Persian monarchy's 2,500th anniversary. At the center of it all stood Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. To the world, he was the Shah of Iran, a visionary, a modernizer, a billionaire. To his people, he was the Shah, the king of kings. He sat atop a mountain of oil and a sea of diamonds. He was the man who turned a desert nation into a global superpower. But as the champagne flowed and kings toasted his greatness, the seeds of a violent revolution were already taking root. Within 8 years, this man, the most powerful monarch on the planet, would be fleeing for his life, rejected by his friends, and dying in a lonely hospital bed in Cairo. Tonight, we unravel the most dramatic tragedy of the 20th century. This is the story of the Last Shah of Iran. The rise, the staggering luxury, the secret police, and the chilling final days of an empire. The Pahlavi dynasty didn't begin with a prince. It began with a soldier. The Shah's father, Reza Shah, was a man of iron who seized power in a coup and rebuilt Iran from the ground up. But the son, Mohammad Reza, was different. He was refined, educated in Switzerland, and obsessed with turning Iran into a modern European-style state. When he officially took the throne in 1941, the world was at war. Iran was occupied by British and Soviet forces. But the young Shah had a secret weapon: oil. As the world's thirst for oil exploded, so did the Shah's bank account. By the 1960s, he launched the White Revolution. He wasn't just building roads, he was building a new identity for Persia. He gave land to millions of poor farmers, he built hundreds of schools, and most controversially, he gave women the right to vote and the freedom to walk the streets of Tehran in Western fashion. In the 1970s, Tehran was the Paris of the Middle East. Rock stars performed in luxury hotels, American businessmen flooded the streets, and the Shah was spending billions on the most advanced military technology in existence. He was the only foreign leader ever allowed to buy the legendary F-14 Tomcat, the world's most advanced fighter jet at the time. But as the cities grew taller and the jets flew faster, the traditional heart of Iran, the religious clergy and the bazaar merchants, began to feel left behind. The Shah was moving too fast, and he was doing it with a velvet glove that hid an iron fist. To understand the Shah's ego, you have to look at the 1971 celebration at Persepolis. This wasn't just a party, it was a political statement. He invited every king, queen, and president in the world. The logistics were insane. Maxim's of Paris, the most famous restaurant in the world, was hired to cater the event. They flew in 150 chefs and tons of ingredients from France. The menu included quail's eggs stuffed with caviar, peacock meat served with truffles, and vintage wines that cost thousands of dollars a bottle. The tent city built for the guests was made of flame-retardant silk and featured air conditioning, marble bathrooms, and individual telephones connected to the global network. The total cost? In today's money, it is estimated at over $1.2 billion. But while the Shah was sitting on the peacock throne, a masterpiece encrusted with 26,000 precious stones, half of his nation was living in poverty. The drought was killing crops. Inflation was skyrocketing. The contrast was too much. To the religious conservatives, the party was a satanic display of decadence. To the students, it was a slap in the face. The Shah was living in a golden bubble. He believed the world loved him. And because he was surrounded by yes men, no one dared to tell him that his own people were beginning to hate him. You cannot tell the story of the Shah without talking about the shadow that followed him everywhere. SAVAK. Created in 1957 with the assistance of the American CIA and the Israeli Mossad, SAVAK was more than just an intelligence agency. It was the guardian of the Shah's ego. Their mission was simple: eliminate any opposition to the monarch. By the mid-1970s, SAVAK had thousands of agents and tens of thousands of informants. They were in the schools, the factories, and even the Iranian embassies abroad. People became afraid to speak to their own neighbors. A casual joke about the Shah could lead to a knock on the door in the middle of the night. The prisons, like the infamous Evin prison in Tehran, became centers of horror. Human rights groups like Amnesty International called Iran one of the worst human rights violators in the world. Intellectuals, poets, and religious religious leaders were tortured and silenced. The Shah justified this by saying it was necessary to stop communism, but in reality, he was creating a generation of martyrs. Every student he imprisoned became a revolutionary. Every religious leader he exiled, including Ayatollah Khomeini, became a hero in the eyes of the masses. While the Shah's Western allies turned a blind eye because of the oil and the anti-Soviet alliance, the pressure cooker inside Iran was about to explode. 1978, the year the dream died. It started with a small protest in the city of Qom. The Shah's police fired on the crowd. People died. In Islamic tradition, a memorial service is held 40 days after a death. At those memorials, more protests broke out, more people were shot, and a cycle of violence began that the Shah could not stop. Suddenly, the great civilization was burning. Movie theaters were torched, banks were looted, and the streets of Tehran were filled with millions of people chanting, "Death to the Shah." The Shah was paralyzed. He was secretly fighting cancer, and the medication made him indecisive. He didn't know whether to be the great modernizer or the iron dictator. He sent his army into the streets, but on Black Friday, the massacre of hundreds of protesters convinced the soldiers to stop firing on their own people. By January 1979, even the Americans knew it was over. President Jimmy Carter sent a secret envoy to tell the Shah's generals not to interfere if the Shah left. The King of Kings was being told to go on vacation. On January 16, the Shah and Empress Farah walked to their private Boeing 707. The Shah was carrying a small box of Iranian soil. As the engines roared, he looked down at the land he had ruled for 37 years. He would never see it again. 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile. Millions of people flooded the streets to welcome him. The 2,500-year-old monarchy was replaced by an Islamic republic in a matter of days. The final act of this tragedy is the most haunting. For the next 18 months, the man who once hosted the world's leaders became a Flying Dutchman. He went to Egypt, then Morocco, then the Bahamas, then Mexico. No one wanted him. His old friends, the kings and presidents he had toasted with in Persepolis, now saw him as a political poison. The Americans, fearing for their oil interests and their embassy, refused to let him in. It was only when his cancer became life-threatening that Jimmy Carter allowed him into a New York hospital. The reaction in Iran was explosive. Revolutionaries stormed the U.S. embassy in Tehran, taking 52 Americans hostage. They demanded one thing: give us the Shah or the hostages die. The Shah was forced to move again, to a military base in Texas, then to a jungle island in Panama. He was a prisoner of his own history. Finally, the only man who stayed loyal to him, President Sadat of Egypt, offered him a final home in Cairo. On July 27, 1980, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi took his last breath. He died in a hospital bed, surrounded by a few family members and the ghost of an empire. He left behind a fortune in Swiss banks, but he died a man without a country. The story of the last Shah of Iran is not just a story of a fallen king, it is a warning. It shows that no matter how many diamonds you own, no matter how many fighter jets you buy, if you lose the heart of your people, you lose everything. He wanted to bring his country into the future, but he tried to do it by ignoring the past. He built a great civilization on a foundation of sand, and when the tide of revolution came, it washed everything away. Today, the ruins of Persepolis still stand. The golden tents are gone. The songbirds are silent. And the name of the last Shah remains a subject of debate, a visionary to some, a tyrant to others. Thank you for joining us on this 3,000-word journey into the rise and fall of the Persian Empire. This is our global mystery series. If you want more deep dives into the secrets of history, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. Let us know in the comments, do you think the Shah was a hero or a villain?